wellnesscouch.com, streaming wellness into your lives.
Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, featuring your hosts Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Julie Tenner.
And I'm Bridget Wood. And this week we're talking about how to create a win-win. And it really came about, I guess, through a lot of our own work around our own growth and how we can kind of raise our awareness and stuff like that. But also through an interaction that I had with my son, which I really thought, gosh, like our kids are always providing us opportunities to teach what we're learning and, I guess, growing ourselves, right? And so this concept of a win-win comes about because so often when we think that we want to have something, that will take away from somebody or something else. So for you to achieve this, then that means that person's going to be at a detriment. Instead, this is flipping it to say, okay, how can I have this while also making sure that person has this, So that's really that scenario of each party winning in an arrangement.
Rather than someone losing.
Yeah.
And it does require a bit of creativity in the way that you approach a problem. So it's not as simple as black and white, win and lose. I get this and therefore they miss out on that.
Yeah.
It's about actually expanding what that means to you and seeing how what you do or give or ask for serves equally the other person, and how you start to talk to those people in their values to create a win for you in receiving the thing that you want, but at the same time seeing how that serves them as a win for them.
And I know we've touched on this in earlier podcasts around, particularly with care for your children, so finding some space for yourself through having your child cared for, but also what is the win for the person who's looking after your child. So perhaps if they've got a strong value on creating artwork, and your child also loves to do art, then that's all, you're actually facilitating an opportunity for them to do their artwork while also looking after your child and expanding their form in which their love of art takes. And so you're both winning in that scenario. You get the childcare, they get an opportunity to express themselves in their highest value. So really this is what we're talking about here. But the centerpiece of it is values, right?
So when we're talking about values, it's probably a good point to start thinking about how do you talk in other people's values. And in order to even begin talking in other people's values, it's how do you even notice, see, become aware or know what other people's values are. Because you can't walk up to them and go, what are your top values?
No.
Because likely that's language and concepts most people will have no idea about.
Yeah, and I guess the good way to understand other people's values is to listen to them. So people will show their love through their highest values, and people will talk to you often in their values.
Yes.
So if they have a high value on a family, then they're likely to ask you, how are the kids?
Yes.
How's your family going?
It's the things, so when people first meet you or they walk up to you, it's the questions they ask you. What do you do for a job? Well, high value is likely career for them.
Yeah.
Are you going on a holiday this year? Likely travel is a high value for them. How are the kids? Likely family is a high value for them. It's when you're in a social setting you start to notice people having conversations about specific topics, and you start to kind of tune into the category that those topics belong to.
So it's really practicing the art of listening so that you can really...
And observing.
And you really hear it. Another way to look at it, is obviously if you know this person on social media, is to go and look at their newsfeed.
Yes.
What are the kinds of articles that they share? What are the kinds of things that they talk about?
Yes.
If they're in a relationship, or if it's somebody you're in a relationship with, how do they tend to express their love for you? Is it, in my husband's case, it's doing things around the house and providing in that sense of creating things and building, useful...
It's like acts of service.
Acts of service, yeah. And so like the concept of a love language is really this too. It's how do they express their love for you, because it'll be through their highest value.
So like me, I like to cook food whenever someone is sick or struggling around me. Well, you could probably tell a high value for me is food.
Yeah.
Or, you know, it's really starting to just become aware and tune into what do they love to play with, right? We're talking about kids. What are the things that each one of those kids is really attracted to? Or likewise, what does play look like for that adult? What is the recreational pursuits, the things that light them up? Because that will underpin a value. Is it creativity? Is it sport? Is it physical exercise? Is it reading clubs? Is it, you know, like that will also underpin a basic value for them that you can then start to talk towards. So if you're going to, you know, have a meeting, you want to be fairly aware around what that person's values are so that you can start to talk in their lingo, I suppose, based on what they most value. So maybe they value productivity. Maybe they value, I don't even know, financial gain. Maybe they value connections in community. So as soon as you start to see what underpins what is most important to them, you can start to creatively manipulate a situation to create a win-win that serves their top values and serves your top values. And it's like this for our children. So maybe now's a good time to start talking about your story with Hugo so we can expand from there.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. So often I think with, you know, 3-year-olds there's that I want thing.
Yeah.
You know, Hugo's very interested in all the presents that he can have and all the things he can buy. Which, you know, is interesting, right? Because I get really triggered. But that's another thing. Because he you know, like we'll go to a friend's house, and this is what we did the other day. Went to a friend's house, and he just loved playing with this one particular toy. And he was saying, oh, you know, I really, really want Maury's rubbish truck. I said, oh, you know, we can't really just take Maury's rubbish truck. And it's one of those things you go there and you play with when you're there, and we leave it there. And then I thought, oh, hang on a sec, we might be able to kind of come up with something here. So I said, the only way you might be able to borrow Maury's rubbish truck is if you had a good think about some of your toys that he might be interested in borrowing, and you can do a swap for a week. And then I could see his eyes light up, and he's thinking of all the toys that he could possibly swap with Maury that Maury might like. He's like, I'm going to love having Maury's rubbish truck. I said, yeah, but we need to make sure that Maury's happy with the exchange that you're offering him. So what we did is I videoed Hugo doing this proposition to Maury, saying, you know, Maury, I'd really love to borrow your rubbish truck. In exchange, can I give you my fire truck and my rocket truck, and we can swap them both for a week? So I sent this to his mum. We haven't heard back yet how that went. But that was a great opportunity for me to simply, I could have just shut down the whole no, you're not borrowing his toy, and that would have been the end of that. Yeah. Or I could have, you know, entertained his ideas that was fine to just borrow something with no exchange there. But we wouldn't have had that opportunity for him to then think, how can I also give value when taking something at the same time? And it was a really interesting conversation, because then I started to see in Hugo, he clearly really wants this rubbish truck, because he started to bring out more toys that he could swap with it. In the video, he kind of runs off and grabs another car that he might be able to give. And I thought, wow, that's such a great early life skill to cultivate, because instead of always thinking, what can I get out of this situation, it's not only what can I get, but what can I give? You know, how can I serve? And I mean, ultimately, when we talk about genius, which is what we come back to a lot in our podcast and in the program, you know, your greatest genius is your greatest level of service. So if you can be always asking, not what can I take from the world, what can I serve the world, that's when abundance truly
And it starts small. Like, that can feel like really big. What can I serve the world?
Yeah.
What is my genius? Can feel really big. But when you take it down to the day to day, I just love what a teaching opportunity you've provided your son there, because that is life skills. In terms of, in that moment, he's had to really think about the value of the thing that he wants.
Yes.
And he's then having to very creatively think about how to match or equal that value with something that he can provide in exchange. And that is the total genius behind entrepreneurial business, behind large-scale business, and behind small-scale social day-to-day interactions and
this
life success.
This is the principle of fair exchange. And so fair exchange is when both parties are respected and honoured and fulfilled in a transaction. Yeah. And fair exchange is when business and life and relationships work most effectively. Because if you're out of fair exchange, is the point at which resentment will build. So if you feel like somebody is taking all the time from you, never giving, you'll build up resentment to that person and you'll get pissed off. And similarly, and if you're the person who's always giving, there's also that sense that you're dishonouring yourself in that, because you're almost allowing yourself to be a bit of a doormat. Our natural balance, if we're thinking about the body always working back to homeostasis, our psychology is always trying to work back into fair exchange. That's the equanimity point. And so there's always opportunities for us to be asking ourselves, how can I serve at the same time as receive for what I want?
And I just love how that also applies to conflict resolution. So you and I have done a couple of podcasts on how to create win-wins in terms of conflict resolution and relationship restoration, which is what you're wanting to do, I think, in schools, but rarely happens, but also at home within relationships and choices your kids may make that are not ideal. In terms of, you got to think about the, not severity, but the enormity or the intensity of what you've done or chosen to do, what choice you've made, and what is the equal restoration that balances that out, that serves those people in a win so that everyone feels good. So in you serving them in an equal kind of capacity that you think matches that restoration, you get that same level of equality or feeling good in that situation. So what you're teaching in a win-win is applicable to nearly every area of life. And starts the child thinking creatively and outside the box on building relationships, which leads on to finding genius in themselves and within those people around them, which leads on to what? I mean, that's just an extraordinary life to start
it is.
there.
And I think too, so much of parenting is also asking ourselves critically, is what I'm doing for my child here helping or hindering my child? Because I think that the whole mother martyrdom thing, which can come back which can plug into what we feel like we didn't get. Sometimes you can go into over-mothering and you can end up doing too much for your children, which can actually be a hindrance to them. And I find myself saying this sometimes to my son when he really wants me to do things for him that he can clearly do himself. And I'll say to him, I'm not helping you by me doing this for you. And so starting to get him to think about the importance also of doing things for himself that he can do for himself. And not all the time. We all have times when we're, we just want to be looked after and want to be cuddled and have things done for us. But I also know that, because my dad used to do this, pick up after us all the time. Or, we didn't have to get up from our chairs sometimes because he just, that was his way of serving us. His service was to, provide in that sense of picking up after us, but that also has its drawbacks, and you breed lazy children. So it's really interesting to think critically about even your parenting and how can you bring in basic opportunities for your kids to step up and for them to start thinking about how they can contribute, not simply just take from the family or not simply just receive all the time from their mother and father. How can they also contribute in that dynamic as part of a team?
Oh, I just love that. I think this is fantastic learning. And in terms
of... you do that a lot, particularly with the older kids.
With my older... Yeah, I do, I'm constantly thinking about the win-win, and I'm constantly in the process of owning whatever choices they've made. I'm wanting them to really... gravity is the right word. I'm really wanting them to understand with huge amounts of empathy the gravity of the choices they've made on those around them. Now, that's obviously because one of my biggest values is community and relationships, right? So I'm looking at, you need to understand the community and relationships impact that you've had here. So that certainly comes from my value, and I can see that playing out. But I also see community and relationships are what build success. It's not about how smart you are.
No.
It's about how you interact with people and how you create win-wins by talking in their values.
Yes, absolutely.
That is the key to success. And it doesn't matter if you're talking about intimate relationships or you're talking about business relationships or whatever. So I do this with my kids all the time. Whatever the choices are that they've made, they need to consider the gravity and the impact that's had on themselves and those around them. And they need to come up with an equal restoration practice with that creates a win-win for everybody, so we no longer need to hold on to that wound or that grudge or that because one of us feels hard done by.
Yeah.
It's about knowing that by giving an act of service, you're creating just as much freedom for yourself because you no longer have to hold on to the fact that you were bad or wrong.
And I love that because it's such a great departure from punishment and rewards, and it's really, really constructive.
Yes.
It gives them life skills that they can take into adulthood.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's the same thing. I love this idea of a win-win. And to be honest, it kind of blew my mind when you and I started talking about this. Having been an entrepreneurial businesswoman for a decade, I hadn't clicked into this idea of a creative win-win until I met you and we started having these discussions. So that was, 3-ish years ago. And it blew my mind starting to consider that the new way of doing business is not the old way of doing business.
Which is kind of a bit cutthroat. How much can I get? Kind of.
Well, it is that, but it's also I pay for this service because money is the highest value.
Yes.
Whereas in today's society, money is not the highest value because in actual fact, sorry, I think that's my phone going. Can we just pretend that's not happening? Yeah. In actual fact, social, connections, business connections, the win-win is bigger than a monetary exchange. And in fact, money is a lower value.
Yeah, I mean, they both serve, and it depends on the nature of the transaction. But so often, creating equitable partnerships between businesses can be enormously fruitful for both the businesses involved, but also the clients that they serve. And I mean, that's absolutely what we've done with Nourishing the Mother.
Yes.
When we have put so much time and energy into pulling together some fantastic businesses to collaborate with, where we can provide value to you, our tribe, through giving you access to really interesting products that align with our ethos.
Yes.
At the same time as giving these businesses an opportunity to access, people who are potentially interested. Not this kind of scattergun approach, let's kind of try and saturate the market.
Yes.
Which is futile and doesn't serve their niche.
No, exactly right. And so we've been able to create a win-win with our collaborators, which completely morphs and changes the way that you approach any business.
Yeah.
So, which I find extraordinary. And, I've certainly been talking about that with my friends, and even my sister with her photography business has started doing this with collaborating with some other businesses in cross, cross-collaborate with products and services, and you cross-collaborate with your tribes, and you both win in that because when you're speaking to the same type of niche ethos that you're or niche, that is creating a win-win, and in essence is of more value than simply paying for a service. So this concept of a win-win serves our children far beyond just the moment, but it starts at those moments.
It does, and it can be those simplest of interactions to provide those learning opportunities. Yeah,
and I really totally love that you saw that and thought outside the box in order to create that, because that will automatically become part of Hugo's brain process and lingo from now on. When he wants something, his go-to will be, what can I give in exchange?
Yeah.
It's not going to be, well, I want it.
Which is interesting because I've really struggled with that whole idea of, because, he's constantly sort of asking for presents and it comes from, quite often the grandparents buying him the odd Matchbox car. So then every time he goes to the supermarket, he's expecting a Matchbox car.
Yeah.
At what point do you bring in the service component to that where there's not, you don't simply just get something because you get something. There's a relationship there.
Yeah.
Which is, something that you really need to work through, I suppose, individually.
Another great example of this was my youngest daughter's birthday is coming up, and she's 3, and I was so desperately hoping to just avoid a birthday party because of the amount of time and effort that is involved in it. But unfortunately, as number 3, she's acutely aware of what a birthday party is.
Yes.
And in fact is already talking about her birthday party that I was hoping was non-existent. So I totally didn't get away with that. So I was thinking in my head, oh my God, how do I create a win-win? Because I'm feeling like I'm just taking away from what else I want to be doing, right? And I have this, I'll talk about another win-win actually. I have this fantastic collaboration, that's what I'm going to call it, with one of my son's older sisters who lives around the corner. So she's...
Son's friends.
One of my son's friends' older sisters, So she's 11 and she's our school captain, and she's just a beautiful soul, and I'm good friends with her mum and blah, blah, blah. And so a couple of years ago when Lola was little and I was really struggling because she was such an attached, needy child, and that's a whole nother story. I needed some time just to get my house cleaned. I didn't want to pay $30 an hour for a cleaner, so I worked out, talked to her mum about, could this girl Talisha come to my home for 2 hours after school one night a week, and for that 2 hours she just plays with Lola and gives her attention and I can clean my house. So we came up with this arrangement, and so I pay her an hourly fee, which is ridiculously cheap. And she thinks it's amazing money. And in exchange, I get 2 hours to do whatever I need to do. Now, back then, it took 2 hours to do top to bottom of my home, and then I felt really good for the rest of the week that my home was in order.
Yeah.
Now, as my daughter's got older, it's easier to kind of fit housework in here and there. So now I do a mix of whatever needs doing at the time, a bit of business, a bit of meal cooking, a bit of housework, whatever it is. But that 2 hours is just mine. And in essence, what's happened along the way is that my daughter has created a fantastic relationship with another intimate caregiver who plays so wholeheartedly and intentionally with her in a way that I never could. That provides her with so many benefits, like to the point where my 3-year-old legitimately thinks that this 11 or 12-year-old girl is her like best friend. I'm like, oh mate.
Oh, sweet.
I know, it's sweet, but then, you know, if we catch up for family play date, she's like, why isn't she playing with me? You know, like, I'm awesome. Why wouldn't she want to play with me? It's like, but for the purpose of babysitting, it's like amazing because my daughter has this fantastic relationship with her. And in exchange, this girl has learnt how to have a first-time job, how to be more responsible, how to think, how to plan and prepare for kids, like so many life skills, and what she's going to do with that money that she's earning. Like,
and so you've just stepped it up a little bit, haven't you?
So with this birthday party, I went, oh, God, I really don't want to do this. I don't have time. If I could just do the food and coffees, I'd be all right. I just don't want to have to look after 20 kids or whatever it is.
And, you know, plan the games and all that kind of stuff.
And then I thought, Talisha.
Hello.
And so she came over last night and I had my older 2 kids in the kitchen. They were all in the kitchen with me. And I said to her, you know, Tisha, I have this idea. How would you feel about running Lola's birthday party for 2 hours, just games that you plan in any way you want with those kids, and I will pay you $20 an hour for 2 hours. Now, you can choose to spend that $20 just on yourself and you run the whole party, or you can choose to hire a friend or minions in any format that you choose, and that money is up to you how you spend it, how you delegate it. And you write every game you want to do, the list of things you need, and I'll go and buy those things. And you could hear her head just like, tick, 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 you know, she thought this was like unbelievable, $40, like most amazing money. In my head, I'm going, this is like the biggest win-win ever. Like for $40 to not even have to think about this is like amazing in my world. And she would plan it unbelievably well. Like the game she would come up with, the way she would run it would be perfection, you know. And so I'm in the kitchen, she's thinking, going, yes, okay, you know, asked a few questions. And then she goes, look, I think I might do it on my own. And Heath goes, yeah, that's what I do too, because I'd want the whole $20 for myself. And my daughter Jade goes, oh, no. You'd need to hire someone like me and pay that person $10 an hour so that you're paying $10 each and you're running the party together. And Talisha goes, oh, well, that's interesting. He goes, nah, I just find someone who'd do it for me for free. And then Jade's like, no, you can't do that. He goes, all right, I'd find someone who'd do it for $1 or $2. And I was standing back watching this whole interaction thinking, this is golden. Like the way that I have this one situation and all 3 of them have approached it in a completely different way based on their own set of values.
I love that.
Like, it's hilarious.
And getting to think outside the box, right? And getting to design their own way of doing something and you know, think creatively.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
So cool. And I found it so interesting. So clearly my daughter has a value on relationships and fairness. So she's like 50-50, let's run it in a partnership.
Yeah.
Talisha's very gifted and probably had in her head, I just want to control the whole thing and do it myself.
Yeah.
And Heath, my son's like, well, how can I make the most amount of money for the least amount of effort here?
It's a true entrepreneur, right?
Right, which is, you know, money's as a high value. And again, working out how can he utilise his skill in leadership to bring in what he needs in a partnership.
Yes.
So all 3 of them have genius in a completely different form that you could see playing out in the one scenario. Yeah. So it comes back to what is reality, right? Because we all approach it differently.
Totally. And this all came about from simply looking at
how do I create a win-win?
How do you create a win-win? And then all the gifts of that in these kids.
Oh, it was just like I just went, this is unbelievable. And I had spoken to Tisha's mum and she's like, oh, this will be amazing learning for her, and da-da-da-da. And this is perfect, right? We imagine how many win-wins you are missing in your day, and the ripple effect that has on the person on the other side of that win. There's no losing.
No. And I mean, what that does also is inspires them to think creatively, because where they might have simply gone into, oh, I should do that, or, I need to do it by myself, they're going to also start thinking creatively of how they can, also create a situation that means that they free up their time while still getting what they want to have done, which is what this is about.
So I just thought, hopefully, with those two examples of, Hugo's genius of finding an equal value swap.
Yeah.
And my example of the 3 kids' genius in how to utilise their values to create a win-win with their own communities. Is hopefully you can start to see how it applies, how you start to notice the values of those around you and how they speak really loudly, just we're not tuned in to listening to what those values are, and therefore how we can start to utilise those values to create more wins in our day that don't create more losers for those people, that create more wins and start to really get creative around how you're approaching just your day-to-day.
Yeah, it's inspiring.
Yeah.
I'm pumped.
So if any of these podcasts have really spoken to you, please share them with your tribes. Please post them to your friends. Please comment below if there's something that really spoke to you. If you have a specific question, we'd love for you to write it on our Facebook page so we could message you back about those, help you break those apart. At times, if it's in depth, we might even do a video message back to you to start breaking that down. Please rate our podcast on iTunes, because it keeps it ticking over in iTunes, which is really super helpful for us.
Totally.
And please check us out on nourishingthemother.com.au. And Bridget, how do we connect with you?
suburbansandcastles.com. And Jules?
thepleasurenutritionist.com. And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives. Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any